All right, my fabulous mathematicians, let's take a peek at some adding and subtracting fractions with uncommon denominators. And remember, we add and subtract fractions with uncommon denominators using the same strategy. The key to adding and subtracting is finding the common denominator. So we're going to find those common denominators first, right? Let's look at a first example that's more of an easier example because we're using some benchmark fractions. So I have my problem here, 1/2 plus 3/4, and that equals something. And I have my models right below it to show you 1/2 and 3/4. We can't add them together yet because they're not the same denominator, so the size of the pieces are different. This one is much larger than a fourth, the half and the fourth. So we have to change one of the denominators to become the other one. So if I just cut these halves in half, now I have fourths. So instead of 1/2, I have instead 2/4 plus 3/4. Remember, when we add, we only add the numerators. We do not add the denominators. The denominators are just telling us the size of the pieces. This fraction is not a keeper, remember, because it's improper. If the numerator is bigger than the denominator, we call that fraction improper. So we have to divide. Fractions are just division. This just means what's 5 divided by 4. 4 goes into 5 one time, and there's 1 left over. So 4 goes into 5 once. I can take out 1 whole, 4/4, which is 1 whole, and then I'm left with 1/4 behind. The remainder becomes the numerator, and the denominator is the divisor. So 5/4 equals 1 1/4. This goes together to be 1 1/4. All right, let's see what we do when we don't have the model in front of us. All right, here's our next one. 5/6 plus 3/4. Okay, the first thing we want to do is find that common denominator. And if you know, I've said this over and over again, I don't always write mine horizontally. I change it so that they're vertically. It makes it much easier for me to not make mistakes and to keep my problem lined up if I write it vertically. All right, so now that I see the denominators are different, I know I'm going to be changing these fractions to make the same denominator. To find the common denominator between 4 and 6, remember correctly, I made this T-chart, 6 and 4, and I started skip counting. 6, 12, 18, 24. I'm going to go down to the 4 for a little bit. 4, 8, 12. I can stop. I found that common denominator. Now remember, we did say that you could just multiply these two numbers, 6 times 4, and if I kept going with my 4's here, 24 would also be a common denominator. It just means you're going to have to simplify more at the end. So you could multiply them together or find that least common multiple, which will be our common denominator. I'm going to use that one. So we're going to change both of our denominators to 12. Now in order to change those denominators, I have to multiply 3/4 by something to get 12s. So 4 times what is 12? 4 times 3. If I multiply the denominator, I have to multiply the numerator, do the same thing. Because 3 over 3 is the same thing as 1. So I'm not multiplying by anything that's going to change the value of 3/4. It's going to remain the same value. It's just going to change the size of the pieces. So I have to multiply the numerator and denominator. So 3 times 3 is 9. 6 times 2 is 12, so I have to do that as well in the numerator. 5 times 2 is 10. Now I can add them up. 11/12 plus 9/12. I'm sorry, 10/12 plus 9/12. 10 plus 9 is 19, and the denominator stays the same. I'm going to fix my improper fraction. How many 12s go into 19? Just 1. When 12 goes into 19 once, I take that 12 12ths out, and I'm left with 7 12ths behind. 1 and 7 12ths. If I'm going to subtract this instead, and instead it was 5, 6, let me raise this up a little bit. If it was 5, 6, minus 3/4, it doesn't matter about adding or subtracting. I still have to do the same thing. I would have to make it 10 12ths minus 9 12ths the same way as I did when I was going to add them. The only difference is I would subtract the numerators instead of add them. So 10 minus 9 would be 1/12. Okay. Same strategy, adding and subtracting. We have to find that common denominator. So use those least common multiples to find that common denominator. Okay? If you need some more help in remembering, just check out the Mathematics video below, and it gives you more examples of how to find those common denominators when you add and subtract fractions. Okay? All right, let's do one more example if you need it. Stick with me. Okay? Let's do 3/5 plus 3/4. Okay? We need to find our common denominator because they're different. So I know I'm going to be changing my denominators. I've got a 5 and a 4. So let's skip count. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. I'm going to stop and go down to my 4s. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. I'm going to stop. There's my least common multiple. So we're going to make our denominators 20. What times 4 is 20? Times 5, so we have to do that in the numerator as well. 15. 5 times 4 is 20, so I need to do that in the numerator as well. 3 times 4 is 12. When I add them up, I get 27 20ths. Now I need to fix it. How many 20s go into 27? 1, and left over is 7 20ths. 1 and 7 20ths. Good luck with your problems. If you have any problems or have any questions, just let me know and I will help you out. Check out the Mathematics video below to have some more practice on finding those common denominators.